So yesterday, advocates were at the state capitol calling for changes to the state's scaffold law. And if you're not familiar with the issue, the legislation places the liability of many work-related injuries in the construction industry or on the employer. And many say it's time for this to change. Actually, they've been saying that for quite some time. Among those are my next two guests. Tom Stebbins is the executive director of the Lawsuit Reform Alliance, and Margie Miller is from Curtis Lumber. Welcome. Welcome back.
Thanks so
Good
much for having us.
Okay, so you are like jazzed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm excited. It's a great day for tort reform here in Albany.
All right. I mean, and the reason is, unfortunate. Certainly, it's a tragedy for state government writ large. But that is to say,
it's been a tragedy for 20 years.
Yes,
I think.
I know. But we don't want to see people fall from grace in such a spectacular manner. The Speaker of the Assembly is now no longer the Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver, because of a corruption scandal. However, he has been long tied to the Trial Lawyers Association, and he has been an attorney himself, as we now know quite a bit about, and he's not been open to reform, and so now he's gone.
Right, and it was those ties that got him arrested. And in many of our meetings in the past with legislators, they would say, even before the exact figures were disclosed, they would say, Sheldon Silver works for a personal injury law firm, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was really where the conversation started. And it's very difficult to get reforms done when the conversation starts with, the person who's in charge of all the legislation moving in this House is financially benefiting from these laws.
Right.
That's a challenging discussion to have.
So where is his replacement? I mean, where is Carl Hastie on your issues?
Well, we haven't seen Carl Hastie out for or against in any of the bills that we back or any of the bills that are backed by the trial lawyers. We think that, frankly, specifically with the scaffold law, it's a law that only exists in New York. And this kind of corruption, obviously it doesn't only exist in New York, but this, the trial lawyer influence at the very top levels only exists in New York. And so we see reforming the scaffold law as almost ethics reform, as almost proving to the people of New York that New York is no longer in the possession of the trial lawyers.
Okay, so Margie, was this your first lobby day for this?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so my understanding is that the tone was different, that the reception was different. Is that true?
I believe that it was the most positive feeling that I've gotten from a lobby day since I started about, more than 15 years ago. I've been involved with the Home Builders Association for a very long time. It's been an issue for us for a long time.
So how so? I mean, what did they say to you? I mean, they didn't come right out and say, well, now that Shelley's gone, we can start listening to you?
Absolutely, no one would say that. But they did, you had a sense of more receptibility there from them. They were listening, they were asking questions. Some were even hinting that they thought that there would be movement on this.
Really?
Yes.
That would be historic.
That would be nice.
Yeah, where's the administration on this issue right now?
Well, I mean, it aligns with so many of their priorities, whether it's infrastructure or education, and even downstate, Mayor de Blasio, his big push for affordable housing. Affordable housing advocates are among our supporters and part of the coalition. And with this historic budget surplus, the amount of money that's going to be wasted for this law that is doing no one except the trial lawyers any good,
right.
It's a huge amount of money.
Okay, I get that you think it makes sense for him to be with you, but where is he? Do we know? Do we know where the governor is formally?
Well, we're continuing. Last year, he said in Cranes, the trial lawyers are the single most powerful political force in Albany. Mm-hmm. That was before the trial lawyer's main advocate was arrested. We think that calculus has changed.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking that I think that they're becoming more and more aware how this affects not just contractors, and certainly the builders have been on top of this for a long time, pushing for reform. It's really affecting schools. It's affecting every municipal project. It's affecting affordable housing. It's affecting hospitals, nursing homes. Any entity that wants to build in New York State is affected by this.
Or rebuild. We had Habitat for Humanity come out in favor of reform because they said this is hurting our efforts to rebuild after Superstorm Sandy. So it's a very broad coalition, and the effects go a lot farther than most people think.
How is it impacting your business personally?
Our business at Curtis Lumber, well, we want home builders to be able to build. If they can't build, then,
they're not buying.
Then it kind of hurts us. But certainly, you wonder how this might evolve. I mean, this has actually evolved over time. You know, when it was first here in the 1800s, it was a valuable law. It was well-intentioned. I think it has evolved through the court system over time to become an absolute liability, and you're not allowed to, if you have a claim against you, you're not allowed to defend yourself in a court of law, which is, to me, I think unconstitutional. I think it's wrong. It's just been evolving over time, and really it has created what I would call a guarantee. And I like the saying, once you have a guarantee, you create a moral hazard. I believe there's a moral hazard here that has taken precedence through the courts over time, and it's affecting a lot of businesses.
Yeah, Margie brings up the court system, and that sort of diverts me just a minute, but the last time you were here, you and I were talking about the court system.
Right, and talking about Sheldon Silver's influence on it. You
were, in particular as it relates to asbestos cases.
Correct.
And it was asbestos cases actually that brought him down. In part, it was the real estate sector. You know, it was actually two firms that he was getting referrals from. The big one was Whites and Luxembourg, and he was, you know, allegedly kicking back state money to a doctor who was studying mesothelioma, who then, in fact, which is asbestos related, and then, in fact, was making these referrals to the law firm, and he was making millions of dollars. That's what's been alleged by the U.S. Attorney. So are you expecting now that what made us sort of #1 in the annual report on, you know, judicial tort reform hell, if I remember correctly, is that going to change because of this? Is this going to have such a significant trickle-down effect that the entire court system will be changed?
Well, we're already seeing those changes. We saw a change just this week where an asbestos ruling was made at $190 million in favor of Whites and Luxembourg. That was reduced to $30 million. So I think the court is starting to see the spotlight. And in terms of the scaffold law, it's important to note that absolute liability is not written in the scaffold law at all. It's not there. It's a court interpretation that has applied that law. So, you know, we always say we're not opposed to the scaffold law. We're interested in reforming it. We don't want to take away language. We want to add language that says that this does not absolve employees of their own actions, of their own culpability, if that culpability was part of what caused their injury.
Yeah, let us defend ourselves in a court of law, for crying out loud. I mean, if someone is inebriated, if they're not allowed to do what they did, if they're not following proper safety practices or using the safety gear, I mean, those things should be admissible in that sort, especially when we're talking that kind of money. You can't cripple businesses that way. I'm sorry.
So just before we run out of time, I mean, what are you hoping for in terms of your timeline? I mean, the scaffold law is not part of the budget negotiation.
We're actually calling for it to be part of the budget negotiation.
I thought you might.
Absolutely. We want it to be part of the 30-day amendments that the governor proposes. It lines up with so many of the budgetary priorities, whether it's education, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's infrastructure. The Tappan Zee Bridge, the estimates there are that this adds $200 million in cost. So we're calling on the governor, we're calling on the legislature to include this in the budget. It's a budgetary problem that needs to be solved, and it's not helping anyone except the trial lawyers.
Well, we will see. We'll add you to the list of people seeking to get things into the 30-day amendments, and we'll see where you land. I want to thank you so much, Margie, for coming in. Thank you, Tom, for coming in.
Great to be here.